Mercury was born Farrokh Bulsara on September 5, 1946 in Zanzibar. Mercury's parents Bomi and Jer Bulsara were Parsees, are followers of the Zoroastrian religion whose ancestors came from Persia. After Bomi and Jer married, they moved to Zanzibar Tanzania, where Bomi worked as a cashier for the British government's High Court. The family lived a fairly affluent life, with a nanny and other domestic workers. Mercury's sister Kashmira was born in 1952. At the age of 8, Mercury's parents sent him to a boarding school in Bombay, India, where he studied piano and spent his free time with his aunt and grandparents. It was not long before the charismatic young man joined his first band, the Hectics. In 1963, Mercury returned to Zanzibar. Following a bloody revolution on the islands in 1964, the family fled to London. Mercury attended the Ealing College of Art and befriended a number of musicians. In 1969, Mercury joined a group called Ibex as their lead singer. He played with a few other bands before joining forces with his future Queen bandmates. Mercury was born with 4 extra teeth in the back of his mouth, causing his now famous bucktooth grin. In fact, his nickname growing up was Bucky. Mercury never got his teeth fixed because he was afraid it would ruin his impressive 4-octave vocal range. Mercury met his future bandmates, drummer Roger Taylor and guitarist Brian May, around the time he moved to London in the 1960s. They met up with bassist John Deacon in 1971. The quartet, which Mercury dubbed Queen, played their first gig together that June. In 1973, Queen released their first album titled Queen. They quickly followed up with their second album, Queen 2, in 1974, which they recorded in over just 1 month. The album was the first taste of the group's signature harmonies and music styles, including ballads, folk, blues, metal, pop and rock, and included the single Seven Seas of Rhye. Queen's music really only caught on with their third record, Sheer Heart Attack, also released in 1974. With a sound that has been described as a fusion of hard rock and glam rock, Queen had an even bigger hit the following year with their fourth album, A Night at the Opera, in 1975. Queen's popularity continued to soar through the late 70s and early 80s with A Day at the Races in 1976, News of the World in 1978 and The Game in 1980. After the Works in 1984, the group's ability to sell albums began to wane, although Queen continued to draw huge crowds as a live act around the world. In addition to his talents as a singer and songwriter, Mercury was a skilled showman. He knew how to entertain audiences and how to connect with them. He liked to wear costumes often featuring skin-tight spandex and strutted around the stage, encouraging fans to join in the fun. Artistic in nature, Mercury was also actively involved in designing the art for many of the group's albums. Mercury also lived a lavish lifestyle. He loved champagne and liked to collect art, once spending more than $400,000 on a set of hand-painted china. Always one for a party, Mercury threw himself elaborate celebrations. For one particular birthday, he flew a group of friends to the island of Ibiza. The occasion was marked by fireworks and flamenco dancing. By 1989, Mercury largely retreated from public life. He did not promote or tour for Queen's next album, Innuendo, in 1991, and rumors about possible health problems began to circulate. Before his death, Mercury worked in the studio with Queen. These efforts were released in 1995 on Made in Heaven, the group's last album with all the original members. Gone but clearly not forgotten, this collection of Mercury's final performances reached the top of the British charts. Mercury and Queen were recognized for their contributions to American music history when they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2001. In addition to his work with Queen, Mercury released several solo albums, including 1985's Mr. Bad Guy. He also collaborated with opera singer Montserrat Caballé for 1988's Barcelona. One of Queen's most notable performances was in 1985 at the Live Aid charity concert. Simply dressed in a tank top and jeans, Mercury led the crowd through some of the band's greatest hits with great energy and style. He got the thousands of music fans at London's Wembley Stadium to chant along to We Will Rock You. For many who watched the event live or on television, Queen gave one of the top performances of the day-long event, which was organized by singer and activist Bob Geldof and songwriter Midge Ure to raise money for victims of famine in Africa. Inspired by the event, the band wrote the hit One Vision. fame sometimes has too high a price. If Freddie Mercury had become a star in the 2010s instead of in the 1980s, his story would have had a different ending. Sure, our world still has a lot of homophobia in it, but in general there's a lot more support for people who don't conform to heterosexual gender roles. So maybe he would have come out. He almost certainly wouldn't have died. But that's not what happened. According to The Advocate, Mercury probably became infected with HIV in New York in the summer of 1982. The 2016 book Somebody to Love: The Life, Death, and Legacy of Freddie Mercury suggests he was already showing symptoms when he appeared on Saturday Night Live in September of that year in what would be his last US performance. Unfortunately, HIV was still a very new thing in the early 80s, publicly associated with gay men and the gay lifestyle, and Freddie Mercury was not open about his sexuality. Homophobia in that decade was vicious, and the rise of the AIDS epidemic made religious zealots feel justified in attacking gay men both verbally and physically. So Mercury kept quiet, and some of those fears affected the treatment he sought, the people he told, and his decision to stop appearing in public. The coming out song that never came out. Freddie Mercury considered Bohemian Rhapsody to be his greatest achievement, but decades later we're still arguing about what the song actually meant. Mercury himself was pretty cagey about it. According to Rolling Stone, he once answered a question about the song's meaning with these words: "I'll say no more than what any decent poet would tell you if you dared ask him to analyze his work. If you see it, dear, then it's there." A lot of people seem to think Bohemian Rhapsody is a coming out song, though if that's the truth, it is so deeply disguised in metaphor that only a resurrected Freddie Mercury could say for sure. One music scholar even suggested that the line "Mama just killed a man" refers to the metaphorical death of straight Freddie Mercury at the hands of gay Freddie Mercury, which sounds a bit like the conclusion you might come to if you really wanted the song to be a coming out ballad but couldn't decide which line actually supported your theory. But it is also true that at least one person who knew him, manager John Reid, said he thought Bohemian Rhapsody might have been a coming out song, though everyone seems to forget that Mercury never actually came out. If it was a comment on his sexuality, it doesn't seem to have been intended as an overwhelmingly public one.